All right, y'all, let's find our seats. We'll get ready. We're going to chat with Dan and Rachel here up on the stage. So let's find our seats this morning. We can get started. Good morning. Good morning. Let's find our seats. I know everyone takes it a little bit slower on days like this, getting into town, but hopefully it seems like the roads are pretty good. I think I always tell people I love snow if it's not on Sunday, you know? Gives us some time, and Friday snow's perfect because we get it done by Sunday pretty easy. Of course, many of you know we've got Dan and Rachel Smith with us, so I'm going to invite them up, and we'll do a more formal introduction in the morning service. Dan, I'll have you sit by me, and then you've got a mic on, and then Rachel, you can use this mic. So I just briefly want to kind of catch you up, church. Many of you weren't here the last time they were here. They were here in 2018, but the only people who knew they were here was Robert and Joy because, believe it or not, I guess you bring snow with you every time you come, Dan, because the service got snowed out in 2018 when they were here last. And I think then before that, the church let them hit some other churches in 2014. So it was 2011, really, when they were in a service last. So that was 2 pastors ago, believe it or not. And so we're excited to have them. And I know several of you have not met many of our longtime missionaries. And so happy to have them. Dan, I know this is kind of off the cuff, so I apologize if you're not prepared to answer this. Do you know how long our church has been supporting you guys? Was it on deputation when you started raising support? Or
Yeah, that would go back to 2002. It was 2002. I was thinking 2004, but no, it was 2002.
Wow, so we've been supporting church for 24 years. That's awesome, and really excited to hear what the Lord's done. Dan, why don't we do this? Just briefly, we know you're in Portugal, and we were talking at dinner last night. I think sometimes when I think of European countries, I think of like your typical really agnostic, kind of rationalistic people who are just totally anti any spiritual stuff. And as we were talking, there's some of that in Portugal, some of the Catholic influence, but also a lot of other things mixed in there. So give us like a brief orientation to the spiritual culture of the people in Portugal that you're trying to reach.
I would have to say that they're coming out of kind of a Middle Ages mindset of Catholicism, and so they have that as their tradition. And Portugal and Spain were never involved in some of the other goings on in Northern Europe, the Reformation and things of this nature. So they have been basically continuing to do what they've been doing. They were part of the Inquisition, all of this stuff, and they came through that time period to where now they're coming into the modern world. And so grandparents, some of them may or may not have been able to read and write. There is a huge divide between the poor and the rich. And so they've come out of that, and they're still Catholic, but now that's beginning to change to where the young people are more involved in materialism. And so at school, they have moral class for Catholicism, as well as they have science class with evolution. And how they make these two, they seem to be totally opposed, but yet that's part of their system.
Right.
And so, as well as coming out of their old culture, they're still involved with a lot of superstition and witchcraft and witches and things of this nature is all still, our little town, we have all of it. So it's kind of an interesting mix. They're very traditional, very Catholic, but yet they don't believe everything they're taught. And yet they're still trying to correlate that with the modern world of, well, there is no God, and materialism. And so You have grandparents who can identify plants on the ground, what's edible, what's not. They have gardens, this, that, and the other. May not be able to read their mail, but yet their grandkids have iPhones and are totally connected with people on the other side of the world, and they kind of know what's going on with the young people culture and everything else. And it's really kind of a weird mix. So they are going from the old world into the new world quite rapidly. And traditionally, people have left there to go work and come back. And now they're having a wave of immigrants, of people from other countries coming into the country. So now they're trying to absorb that, to where normally Portugal was Portuguese, and they would go out to get jobs, where now you have people coming in trying to get into Europe and getting jobs. So spiritually, I would have to say they're really mixed up, and it's like a buffet. You want the old way? Great. You want the new way? Great. You want to pick something else? Go for it, you know. But when it comes to, you know, hey, we'd like to invite you to our church, their immediate response is, oh, I'm Catholic. Okay, you know, that's their identity.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where they're living in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can pretty much pick and choose almost whatever they want. It's all there.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of sifting through it.
Rachel, what would you add to that? You work with a lot of kids in the public schools. Tell us a little bit about, you know, as you talked about, Dan, there's kind of a generational divide, how people think about spiritual matters. What are you seeing as you minister to kids?
It's interesting.
There's a switch there, sorry. There you go.
Does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
When we first got to Portugal, we have some close friends who had their first child, and they decided they weren't even going to baptize their children in the Catholic Church because they just really didn't feel like it was that important to them, which is a huge generational change.
Oh, yeah.
But now that same family, there's a real push, and partly because of all the immigration coming in. We have Buddhism coming into our town. We have all the different, you know, a lot of Islam, a lot of different religions coming in. And so the Portuguese themselves, the Catholic Church in Portugal has made a huge push to try to keep their young people. And so a few Catholic churches in our town now have youth groups. They have Bible studies. They do all kinds of camps and all kinds of missions trips to the Vatican, and they really are trying to be a lot more active with the kids. And some of the same kids that were really open when they were young teenagers coming to our camp and like that are now fully dedicated in their little groups at their Catholic churches, and the aunts and the grandmas are really pushing them that way. So that's been different. With all the immigration, there's this huge push to try to keep their Portugal tradition.
So Dan, catch us up a little bit. You've been serving in this area of Portugal, Porto Alegre, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 16-ish years. Is
Yeah,
that right?
we got there on a permanent basis in 2005, and we helped with some works around the area, about an hour drive, different areas, and then started trying to actually establish a church there. So probably, yeah, you could probably say within the last 16 years or so, we've had a location to where, you know, open the doors, and we've been trying to reach and have church services.
Yeah, and I know this is going to be hard, but in about 2 minutes, give us a timeline of kind of the church's growth and how it's evolved, and kind of some of those dry seasons we talked about last night.
Yeah, we probably when we started, the other works that were close to us had kind of a revival time back in the late 60s, early 70s, and the churches had grown 30, 40, 50 people out in the countryside, which was really good. But then all of that just kind of slowly went backwards, and after the second generation, it slowly wound down. And so we're in an area that didn't even have that.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing. We're the first Baptist church there. When we got there, there was Seventh-day Adventist, and there was the Catholic Church, and then there was an old Presbyterian work that was there. And that was it, nothing else. And so we came in, kind of opened the doors. We had one or two people that were helping us get going. And it kind of stayed that we divide the ministry into two halves. that was kind of like the early dry time where no matter what we did, people would maybe come to visit, but now we just we can't convert.
Yeah.
So that's not what we were teaching. We were not trying to convert anybody. We were just presenting the gospel, and we're not talking about church membership. We're talking about a relationship with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes time to get somebody to that point of understanding the difference. And so I would say for the first 8 years or so, it was very difficult. Not a lot of visitors. And then
Double click on that before you get
Mhm.
to the second half, those first 8 years, because I think in America it's hard to, for lack of a better term, appreciate
Mhm.
the kind of, to use a missionary term from William Carey, the plodding
Mhm.
that it takes to get something going in a country like Portugal. Give us like a vignette of what it was like in those first 8 years. How many people were you worshiping with, and what was it like as far as trying to welcome visitors and things like that?
For the most part, it was our family and sometimes 2 or 3 others at the most.
I would say, just to give you a clearer picture, Christmas and Easter, we were always alone. It was our family.
Really?
Because the ones who were coming and joining us on Sundays would go home to family for those days. That was hard, because
Yeah.
you want those to be outreach days. You want those to be really joyful days. And we would be sitting by ourselves. And I remember the first year we had 6 guests for Easter, and we were shocked. And they had come, they were all immigrants and had heard about our church and come, and we were shocked.
Wow.
And so we were kind of like trying to get, we understood that you had to kind of be there for a while. And when we came in, people didn't really want to rent for a church building if we wanted to have a place to meet. They didn't know what a Baptist was. They didn't know, well, are you connected with the Catholic Church? They would go and Google us and things of this nature because they had no idea. Their experience was a few churches that came out of Brazil, and they came out and they put on a big show, and the community, they're very out there and boisterous, which is very opposite from your normal European mentality.
Right.
European mentality is much more reserved and subdued, and we're the new world, us and Brazil and Mexico. No, it's much more, hey, how's it going? It's more open and yada, yada, yada. And so those two kind of collided. But they would come in and round up a big crowd, scoop up a bunch of money, and then leave town. And so our little community of maybe 20,000 people was very skeptical of people coming in from the outside. So they're like, I don't know. Our experience has always been, this is a strange occult, and we don't know where it's going to go, and so they're very resistant. And then after that first 8-9 years or so, we've been in the community, working within the community. Our girls went to the school, the same public school with everybody else. We were part of the city band, so we were hanging out with a bunch of Portuguese that we got to know through the city band. And so slowly that began to change to where they no longer looked at us as complete outsiders. They're like, okay, you guys are okay. Then we started to see more kids coming to camp. We had no kids in the youth group except for our girls. But yet when camp happened, we'd have 18 kids. So things were loosening up. They were realizing, okay, you're not that bad, you're fine. And so then they started looking at us as somebody that's similar to them and not a threat. And then we saw Europe as a whole with immigrants starting to come in, and then it kind of changed over. So now you have a lot of people coming in from work in different areas, and they're alone. They're outside their culture, and so now they're looking to have some sort of connection with anybody. And the Portuguese are a little more reserved. So, you're a foreigner, even though you're a foreigner not from their country, but some other country. There's still, the foreigners tended to clump together because that's what they had in common. And so we saw a growth in that area within the church. And then that kind of just kept going.
Yeah.
To where we had, once the church grew a little bit with that, then that showed that oh, well, hey, something's going on here, and more visitors would come. And they would come and start to grow spiritually. They would realize that this is not a normal church what they're used to. And that was kind of a surprise to us. We found out, even though some people may have come from a Christian background, they've never had anybody open the Bible and teach. It was just, you come, you sing, you have a good time, you fellowship, you talk about, God's blessings, and you go on. But nobody actually ever studied. And so we would come in and we'd present, okay, this is what God's expecting. This is, what God wants from us, and what is the Bible actually saying, and how would you, identify theology and things of this nature. What's good teaching, what's bad teaching. And so we would have that, they'd come back and goes, you guys are different. You actually open the Bible and study it. And so that would generate curiosity to where they'd stay. And then we've had people get saved because of that.
Yeah.
Even though they had somewhat of a Christian background, they had no relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
It was just, well, you're supposed to go to church.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, church, if you're to talk about like a charismatic church in the United States, I'd say 50% of them, I would still say preach the gospel, right? Go down the street to the Assembly of God church. They're going to have a very different view on sign gifts than we do as a church, but they preach the gospel. Whereas most of the immigrants you guys are ministering to that come from charismatic backgrounds in Africa and Brazil, it's so prosperity driven.
Right.
It's basically just like a genie in a bottle approach to Christianity where the gospel's just completely lost. And then you have the Roman Catholic situation, which my understanding, you could correct me, is that foreign Roman Catholic churches the gospel is even more gone than even a lot of American Roman Catholic churches. Because it's a little more normal in American context, maybe for some more progressive Catholic churches to teach a little bit of Bible here and there. What would you add, Rachel?
I would say on that, a 15-minute, 20-minute walk from our house, we have a chapel that is dedicated to Lord of the Healing. And everywhere in Portugal, we have different little chapels that are dedicated to Our Lady of the Healing, Our Lady of Suffering, or the Lord of Suffering, things like that. But everything in Portugal is geared around worshiping Fatima, who is kind of a combination of Mary and yet not. But she appeared to 3 shepherd kids way back several years ago when the different apparitions of Mary were happening around the world. And since then, since the late 1800s, mid 1800s, that has been she is Portugal's savior. And so I would say, differing from American Catholicism, that is their focus.
Yeah, it's almost pagan. Like more pagan than normal Roman Catholic Church is pagan as it is.
In
but
that
that's
chapel
even more
close
pagan.
to us, if you have any kind of physical ailment, you can go there and burn candles and pray for healing. And they burn candles in the shape of different body parts that need to be healed.
Wow, interesting.
Which is interesting. If you go to ancient Greece, they had temples that did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, wait, this looks familiar.
Really old pagan stuff.
Yeah.
By the way, church, we may open up for some questions, so if you have some, keep those in mind. I might pop in and give you an opportunity. But Dan, kind of to round out the trajectory you were taking us on, give me like a vignette of if I were to walk into your church today, what I would see. How many people you'd be worshiping with, the type of people that are worshiping there, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, if we walked in there today, you would see a mix of people from literally almost all over the planet. We would divide up into 2 groups. The men would be on one side, the women on the other side. And this is a time where we do like a Sunday school. And we're trying to get people within the church to take teaching roles within the church. And it's straight to Scripture. What does God say about this? What does God say about that? And we discuss it. And then after that, we have a time of where we will have some sweetbreads and time of coffee and mixing. And so now we're mixing. But you have to realize, okay, when you walk in the door and you're seeing everybody, we have Portuguese speaking continental Portuguese. We have Brazilians speaking 2 or 3 different accents of Portuguese. We have 3 or 4 different countries of Africa that also speak Portuguese. And they're speaking a broken Portuguese or a Creole Portuguese mixed with one of their native languages. Then we have, Europeans from speaking German, who are from the Swiss side of German-speaking side of Switzerland. We had French speakers. We've got Ukrainians. We've got Chinese. We've got Cubans. We've got Venezuelans, I mean, just you almost can name it, and we'll have a visitor from Pakistan or something like this. So it's quite a mix. And imagine that. Our town probably has a lot in common with the town here, with you guys in Garden City, because you have a large factory, you're bringing in a lot of workers from all over the place, but you're out in the middle of the countryside, you're in farm country. Our town, that's exactly the
Even
same.
similar population,
Even
25 to 30,000 there.
25 to 30,000.
Yep.
But it's more condensed in a smaller area. And it's amazing, you're just out in the countryside, but yet you can bump into 5-6 different languages just like that, no problem.
Yeah, that's awesome. Rachel, I want you to describe for us, if some of you have been keeping up with our prayer letters, I know several of you are signed up for those, and then we've read them regularly around here. You know that Miss Rachel does a lot of work in the public schools with kids. They're also a big way that they're kind of long-term reaching to the community is a camp that Dan has referenced. So Rachel, why don't you describe those two ministries to us, and then church, I'll pop over and see if one of you want to ask a question. But describe those two branches of ministry to us, how you're working with kids those two ways.
We started our first camp in 2009, and just wanted to try to invite kids and try to reach into the community. We ended up with 6 Bulgarian kids and 1 Portuguese kid. The Bulgarians didn't speak Portuguese except for one that translated, so that was a fun camp. But we've been doing it since then, and we had to shut down in 2020. We got to start again in 2023, so this year will be our 3rd camp since we had to shut down. And we participate with 4 other churches that bring kids as well. So I think our highest camp before COVID, we had 90-something. We were getting close to 100. Last year we had 83, including adults. But last year was a different year because all of a sudden we had adults from all the churches coming to help with camp. So we had like half the number of adults as we had kids, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
And a challenge as well, but it was great. But yeah, it's been, like Dan mentioned, we participate in the city band, and from the very beginning, we started inviting my horn students and other kids in the band. Our city band is a community that has, our daughter entered it when she was 9. They taught her oboe when she started playing in the city band when she was 9. And then the oldest man in the band was 70 at the time.
Yep, about 70.
And so it's a community of families, and we do a lot of activities together. So that kind of became our personal community in Portugal. So we would invite them. They would send their kids to camp. These are Portuguese families. They would send their kids to our camp knowing we were going to teach them Bible, and they loved it. Every year they would come back. They would bring friends. The parents would come to our after-camp family service, where they would hear the gospel, they'd hear everything that was taught at camp and the songs and everything, and they love it. So it's really interesting that they won't come to church, but they will send their kids to that. And so it's just really been a great outreach. In the schools, the Portuguese curriculum includes a Catholic morality and religion class that if you're a Portuguese kid, you pretty much have to go to that. You can opt out of it, but most of them go. And because of freedom of religion, it's also, if they have other kids sign up for a different faith class, the school has to provide it if they have enough students signed up for it. The Evangelical Alliance in Portugal has been very, very strong to push that and have that available in the schools as an outreach. And so they contacted us about 5 years ago, and said, hey, we have some kids signing up for evangelical moral class in your town. Can you guys teach that? So we have been doing that now since 22. Since 2022, we've been doing that. And it just depends on the year, how many kids sign up for it. But the beautiful thing is that the first friend that I made in the band, she is now the district supervisor of the school district, something like that. And so she is the one that, even if they don't have enough kids signed up for it, she's like, hey, Rachel, we've got kids signed up in this school and this school and this school, and all the schools that are under her school district, she'll try to make sure that we're able to have a class in that school.
That's great.
And she's not a believer, but she respects us and she likes what we do. And so last year, one of the girls that was in my class in the junior high or the middle school came to camp. She and her mom and their family went to a very charismatic church. But she started coming, and then she asked if she could bring her sister, and we started picking them up, and they would come with us. And it was just really sweet one day, because I said, well, Weza, why aren't you going with your mom to her church? You know, what's the difference? And she said, well, I would walk in there, and nobody cared if I was there or not. You know, I could go, I could not go, and whatever. But when I come to this church, the leadership is really interested in my spiritual growth. And I mean, these two sisters have been a challenge. We have had to take them aside and correct them so many times. And I really felt like they wouldn't come back. But it was to the point where we cannot continue class with this kind of attitude. It disrupts everything that we're trying to do here. And we'd be like, we want you to come, but you have to cooperate with us. And we honestly several times thought they wouldn't be back, and they keep coming. And so that's a product. She was saved at camp, and her sister recently was saved. And so that's a product of those classes in the schools. And so, and we also get to know the workers in the school and the teachers, because you're required to be in the teachers' meetings for each of the students and all of that. So,
very good. And you guys, you're doing like a little bit of a bus ministry. Is that for kids or adults?
Adults.
Yeah, because everyone pretty much is walking. That's
Right.
part of your congregation.
And the church is located just outside the old city walls of the medieval town, down the hill. So sometimes it's easy for them to arrive at church, but then they got to walk it back up. And if you got, you know, dads with strollers and stuff, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
So we was like, okay, we'll go have a few places that we stop and pick people up and then bring them into town.
So I'm going to open it up for a question here, so get ready to ask. But just want to recap, church, I hope you're getting a sense of the type of area that our friends are ministering in. It's a rural area in Europe, similar sized town to us, obviously a little more condensed is how they live out there. But imagine how different our town would be if instead of having, we probably have 10, 15, 20 gospel preaching churches in our town, if there was one. If our church was the only gospel preaching church, the only church that you could expect to find someone who actually believes the gospel. And on top of that, there's the whole new agey stuff that we're all familiar with, that our kids are growing up with. And on top of that, there's kind of the state-sponsored almost religion and Catholicism that has a grip on people for literally 1,000+ years. On top of that, there has never been a gospel preaching church in that town except for maybe one that was excavated that was in the 3rd century. Might be the only gospel preaching church that was ever in that town. This is where our friends are ministering. Is that a good recap?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So anyone want to pop in and ask a question? Real quick. Ben. Yeah, what led you guys there?
For me, personal experience. I grew up in Hawaii. Hawaii has a lot of Portuguese immigrants, and so they're part of the culture. There was food from Portugal. A lot of vocabulary that's in the broken English of Hawaii is actually Portuguese. You have a lot of Hawaiian words, you have a lot of Japanese words, all mixed into a
Interesting.
broken English.
It's very far from Portugal.
Yeah, and it's the other side of the planet, literally.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in a family. We had about 8 cousins, aunts, and uncles, and one uncle was in the Navy. We were all kind of connected with the Navy in some way, but he was in the naval subforce and then was attached to NATO and was stationed on the other side of the planet in Portugal. So he was living there for 3 years with 2 of our cousins. And so my grandparents decided that they were going to go one year and visit. And they were taking my other cousins with them. But their mom worked for United Airlines, so they got free tickets to go. And so my grandparents bought me and my sister 2 tickets to go with them. So here we are, great-grandma, grandma and grandpa, and about 6 or 7 cousins. We all went to the other side of the world to Portugal to visit our other 2 cousins. We all lived in a house in a fishing village outside of Lisbon. And for 2 months, we just roamed around the countryside and had a blast. And that was my introduction to Portugal. They would take us to castles and all kinds of stuff. But when it was time for church on Sunday, we went and met in a living room of somebody's home. And it was like, wow, okay. And they said, well, for this particular area, we haven't found a place yet. And so we're meeting and having a church in a house with somebody. And I thought that was strange. And Portugal at that time was still, their economy was still very closed. They just came out of a dictatorship. And so there wasn't a lot of other works. There was some older works that had been there, but they were kind of spread out all over the countryside. So when I got back to my church, I was like, yeah, we need to pray for Portugal missionaries because, obviously they need more missionaries there and need more influence other than just what they've had. And they need somebody that's going to teach Scripture. So as I went through high school, that was always kind of the prayer request. Until I got old enough to where, okay, so what am I going to do? Am I going to go Navy, engineering, what do I do? And that always kind of came back to me in the sense of, yeah, you're willing to pray, but are you actually willing to go? So it was like, well, okay. So no, I said, okay, if the Lord wants me to do that, I'll pursue it. So then I went to study to be, in missions, and went to seminary for that. And our family history with the gospel is as such that the church that I got saved in and grew up in Hawaii was actually started by a missionary. And so we were a product of missions. And what was fun is when we started going out to raise support to go to Portugal, we were in a church in California. And then I found out that that church in California had actually supported the missionary who started the church in Hawaii.
Wow.
And now they support us. And so in some sense, we're like, wow, we're 2nd generation from that church, now back in Portugal. And so that's how it works. And so we were like, okay. And so that kind of just made sense. And then God opened the doors.
Yeah.
And to where we finally went and got settled. And it was a struggle. First years, twice we decided that we were going to move on to a different location, but God said no. And we just kept going, and now we're seeing the church grow. And we understand that what we're aiming for is the culture is changing. And so we're prepping the groundwork for the next generation, which will be less tied to tradition and Catholicism. Here in the United States, it's much more open.
Yeah.
Nobody, you pick what you want, you go where you want. There's nothing over you saying you have to do one thing or another. There is. It's a community, everybody's watching each other. And so we know we're prepping the generation that will be walking into a much more open environment. And we're looking towards the future. When that happens, we'll have the groundwork and the foundations already established. And so that's kind of what we're doing. But that's what led me into it, is a personal experience in Portugal. And so we've been coming and going from Portugal for quite a while.
Yeah. And then he was telling me at dinner, Ben, that this specific town, Rachel's dad had gone into it and kind of was doing some groundwork because a lot of the other Baptists in the area had basically said, we've never had a work out there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said, that's the one hole, go there. And it's kind of out there. And historically, that was the region it took the longest to actually accept Catholicism way back when. The country is 1,000 years old plus. And so even back in the Roman Empire days and all that, that region was the last region of Portugal to actually accept Catholicism. And even to this day, they're fairly independent. They kind of have more of a socialistic, communistic mentality in some regards, and they're just really independent from the rest of the country. And it's also considered the hillbilly country of the hillbilly area of Portugal. You say, oh, where do you live? Oh, Porto Alegre. And they're like, oh, immediately it'd be like us saying, oh, we live from the Ozarks in Arkansas, hillbilly country, They're like, oh, you're from that area. Okay, great,
Yeah. One more quick question if someone wants to pop in. Anyone have a quick question? Robert?
In the morality class, what kind of things can you teach? I mean, is it just a straight Bible class? Or
We actually have a lot of freedom. So it's called Evangelical Religion and Morality. The Evangelical Alliance is the one that heads it up. And they do have curriculum available for us to use. They have many different options that we can use. Or we're free to teach whatever we actually really want to teach, as long as it fits. They gave the government 6 different categories of things that will be taught, which is your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your community, your relationship with the world, and with nature. And so if it fits in those categories, we're allowed to teach it. And so it's basically a Bible class.
Yeah.
That's what we've done, because a lot of the kids that come do go to church. Mostly what we have in our classes are immigrants, because the Portuguese go to theirs. And so we have a lot of immigrants that come to these classes. A lot of them go to church with their parents, but they don't really get Bible teaching. And so we've had several kids saved in that so far. We don't expect them ever to be a part of our church, but they've heard a clear presentation of the gospel, and we just keep teaching them. It's basically kind of discipleship on an elementary and middle school level is what we're doing.
So 2 rapid fire questions. I hope I can fit 3 in. It might be a push. I'll go to you, Rachel. It's really easy if someone says, how can we pray for you, to think about how we can pray for the ministry, right? The building, might talk about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Rachel, how can we be praying for you guys? How can we be praying for the Lord to work in your hearts and help you guys as you minister out there?
I think anytime a church grows and you want it to be a healthy church, you want it to be a fully functioning body with members that function, I think you really, really just have to trust the Lord and lean on the Lord and have an open heart to what He wants to do, instead of, because I think anytime you plant a church, you start a ministry, you feel it's very important to make sure it's healthy and it's safe and it's cared for. And so to open your hand, we say that a lot in Portuguese, open your hand, and allow God to use people and trust other people to do what God is calling them to do, and let God be the one that directs the church is the scary thing. And there is definitely the side that the pastors have of making sure everything is doctrinally sound and the church is protected from things that could destroy the church. But at the same time, we don't want to control it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The Lord has gifted the church.
Right.
And I don't think Paul wrote that in 1 Corinthians 12, thinking only the mature members were gifted, but I know exactly what you mean.
So just being able to trust the Lord and rest in Him in that.
Yeah, Dan, just to kind of speed up the church, every prayer letter, when there's I think there's even a prayer request section, right? Pray for a building. You all understand in America how important a building is for just a sense of stability and permanency when the community looks at the church, right? As Americans, we view even restaurants differently if they don't have a permanent location. The same is true for churches in Portugal. And they went through a long series of things where the government promised them a piece of land. That's a little more common in foreign context than it is in America. And all of that has basically fallen through. But it's really important for the longevity of the church, way beyond their ministry there. I appreciate your perspective on this, that they can find a more permanent location. Their location is 250 square yards or meters or whatever.
Square meters.
So 750 square feet. That's their church. Everyone here, I don't know about your apartment, but pretty much everyone here lives in a house bigger than that. So just to give you an idea, it's basically a remodeled garage. And so catch us up how we could be praying specifically with that wealthy man who owns that property, and
Yes.
that the Lord might work on his heart.
Yeah, the developer who developed the area, there is a neighborhood of probably 30, 40 homes, 3 or 4 apartment complexes, as well as a bunch of open property that he has. He's putting 2 new apartment complexes in, but he's the one that owns it. Well, he's our direct landlord. So anything that was unsold that we're renting is rented through him. And we've developed a pretty decent relationship with him. And we were asking him for, hey, some of the new buildings, could you build a floor for us? And he was like, oh, no, it's all residential. We can't put commercial in there. He said, but wait, how much do you need? And we're like, we told him, explained. He goes, oh, hey, if you're really, really interested, I got a piece of property just up here that I could designate for you guys, and I can build you a building. And so we're like, that's awesome, but how much are we talking about? Because he's a middle class to a little bit upper class type builder. So he's wanting to keep the area nice and this, that, and the other. So we're like, but he offered that. And so we're asking the Lord, okay, if this is a serious thing and when the timing is right, let us know. We haven't been able to locate a space in our area that would be big enough for us. There's a few places in the industrial zone, but it's kind of away from where everybody's living. And it's, next to a car dealership and this, that, and the other. And so it's not exactly where you want to be. But the Lord has a plan, and we're praying that the Lord will lay it on this guy's heart to, do something nice for the church, and at least, give us some sort of a discount on the property and building to make it to where we actually could.
Yeah.
The church is putting money away.
Yeah.
For a building. We have some churches that have pledged to help it. We don't want to take all the money from the United States. We want the church to have a part.
Yeah.
It's got to be their building.
Yeah.
It's got to be, so it's not just, that's been the problem with a lot of older works. It's come in from the outside and paid for by the outside.
Yeah.
So they never see the responsibility.
Right.
And so we're like, no, this is our responsibility. We're going to do this as a church. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah. Well, why don't I dismiss you two to head back to your table. Church, if you have additional questions, you visit them so you guys can head back there. And I'll conclude us with a word of prayer, but we'll have a more dedicated prayer time for them at the end of the service, as our custom is. All right? Lord, thank you for this time of just learning about the Smith's Field. I pray, Lord, as we've heard these things, that your Holy Spirit is stirring up in our hearts a desire to be more faithful in prayer and in giving, Lord, and even to think about ways that we could serve beyond that. I pray that this would generate conversations between services and after service. Lord, so I just pray your blessing on the service to follow as Dan preaches and as we hear more about their ministry. And God, we thank you for the day that we get to share with them. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, church, well, feel free, head back there. At the very least, introduce yourself, grab a prayer card, and fellowship a little bit with the Smith family. You're dismissed. Paul, can I have your help? Yeah. Oh, hold on. this. Thank you.